Good Monday afternoon to you. I hope you had a great weekend. Thanks for joining us on Sports4CLE. We'll talk a little bit of Browns and a little bit of Cavs a little bit later in the show with Kevan Arnold from the Voice of the Land podcast. And we begin by talking Browns and NFL football with Tim Bielik, a plain dealer reporter, as well as a reporter for cleveland.com. And Tim, saw 4 really good football games this weekend. When you sit there and you watch these teams, all very good, all very entertaining, what did you see was the biggest difference from the 4 teams that were playing and the Browns?
I think there's a couple things. It's hard to really pinpoint one. I mean, offensive consistency, I think, has to be up there for me, particularly with the passing game. And we saw some tremendous quarterback play in 3 of the 4 games. Obviously, the Niners Packers game was more defensive, but what I saw was, quarterbacks playing much more consistent. And, playmakers obviously getting things done. Jamar Chase obviously was a monster against the Titans. Deebo Samuel made some big plays in Green Bay. You saw Cooper Kupp have a couple of huge plays in Tampa. And then, of course, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Gabriel Davis doing their things in that Buffalo-Kansas City thriller. I think the ability for those teams to have consistency comes down to, quarterbacks being more consistent, playing at a high level much more often, and then obviously having dynamic playmakers to make their lives easier to turn any short play into a big play. Those are huge things. And the other thing also is kicker. And, it's been a decade since the Browns let Phil Dawson go, and we all know how that journey's kind of gone. But, 3 of the 4 games were decided on walk-off field goals by road kickers, and that's so rare to do. Just to have that happen once, but 3 times, we may never see a weekend like that again. So it just comes down to having players who can make those big plays when the moments count, not just at the quarterback position, even though it obviously is more important than all the others, but you got to have those players at all those different levels that can make things happen.
The wide receiver play kind of stood out as well. I thought there were, in each instance, there are guys that were difference makers, and I think that's what you're getting at playmakers. The Browns need to significantly upgrade that wide receiver position in the offseason.
No question about it. It's obvious when you look at the teams that are still playing. Obviously, quarterbacks play a role into it, but even, receiver position matters. Like all 4 teams that are left have dynamic receivers. The Bengals have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Kansas City's obviously got Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, and to a lesser extent, Mecole Hardman. The Rams have Cooper Kupp, and Odell Beckham has been really good in a lesser role. And the 49ers, like Jimmy Garoppolo certainly had his moments, but his life is certainly easier when you have one of the best tight ends in football in George Kittle, and then you have a guy in Deebo Samuel who's not just great, who's not just outstanding as a receiver, but he can also put him in the backfield and hand him the football. That's absolutely incredible. And those are 2 stud weapons that any team would be lucky to have. And if you don't have those guys, then your quarterback is fighting an uphill battle, and you're asking him to do I think, too much. And even Tom Brady needed guys like Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Scotty Miller to step up. So as much as everybody wants it to be just about the quarterback, it's not that simple. He needs help. And in the NFL, when the margin is so thin, you got to have guys that are going to be able to help your quarterback out.
Yeah, without question. And when we talk about quarterback, it's kind of interesting. So Dustin Fox from 92.3 The Fan, former NFL defensive back, tweeted that, do you folks see why you have to have quarterback play, that the quarterback play right now just isn't good enough, hashtag Browns. And interestingly enough, Baker Mayfield, Browns quarterback, liked that tweet. It's kind of interesting because, the way Baker operates, that'll be something that's used as motivation by Baker Mayfield moving forward.
That's how he's been his entire career. It's not surprising that it continues on to this point. And if he takes that and uses motivation and somehow bounces back this year and leads the Browns back to the division round even further, then tremendous. But I'm still kind of one of those people that believes Baker's struggles were a product of so many things more than just, him playing poorly. We forget that he had 6 separate injuries. He injured his shoulder twice, has a broken bone in the left shoulder, had to wear the harness that affected his mechanics. And that's just from him. We saw running backs in and out of the lineup, tackles in and out of the lineup, receivers in and out of the lineup. And when the receivers were in the game, they weren't helping Baker out. And I've said before on this show that, if your quarterback's not 100%, if he's playing with a bad left shoulder that's affecting him, someone's got to step up. Someone's got to be able to get open and make plays with the football in their hands. And that never happened really the entire season. I look at the Pittsburgh game as a prime example. The first one, Baker played well in that game, played well enough to win. But then you look at the costly mistakes in that game. That Jarvis Landry fumble, deep in Steelers territory, that would have been a third down conversion to move the chains, possibly get him in position to take the lead. And then, the next drive, he has a huge backbreaking drop that essentially ends the game. He never got help. And you just cannot ask quarterbacks to do it on their own. And I mean, Baker's obviously got to get healthy. I think we all have seen that. I think he's got to change the way he approaches fourth quarters. That's got to be something he works on in the offseason, how he approaches that differently. But we know he's going to feed off this motivation from the outside, and we'll see, if that gets him back to where he was at the end of 2020 or possibly even better than that.
I mean, there's no question that the Browns quarterback play needs to be better than it was this year. The question is Baker Mayfield able to do that? Was it the injuries? It can't be just the injuries, and I'm with you. I think there were so many other factors. And again, it's a tough decision for the Browns to see exactly why it didn't add up to the way they thought it would at the quarterback position. All right, StatMuse tweets this out. So Jimmy Garoppolo, 9-2 in his career, where he doesn't throw a touchdown pass, 3-0 in the playoffs. Now, as part of that little Twitter battle, Dustin Fox said he'd take Jimmy Garoppolo over Baker Mayfield. I don't know that I'd go down that far. I think Jimmy Garoppolo and Baker Mayfield are similar type quarterbacks. Right now, the difference, though, is Garoppolo has the ability and has shown the ability to do things late in the fourth quarter with the ball in his hand. And I want to see that from Baker Mayfield. That's what I want to see, that, we need you to make this drive, go make this drive. I think he can, but he hasn't done that yet. Right. Enough against enough good teams.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry to interrupt there, but I agree. That's kind of what I was saying in my last answer, where I think part of this offseason, he needs to reevaluate how he's going mentally preparing for these fourth quarter drives, because it's clear his preparation for them and his thought process just wasn't right for whatever reason. He clearly, I think, just didn't have the right approach. Maybe he was pressing too much, trying way too hard to be the hero, and instead just getting the ball in guys' hands. And I think, again, that goes to having guys that can step up in those positions. And I look at Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, he's in a great situation where he could be a game manager, and because of the talent around him and because of the coaching of Kyle Shanahan and what the 49ers have, he doesn't have to be great every game to win. I mean, Kyle Shanahan's going to do a great job scheming other teams up. He's got a very good offensive line in front of him, does Garoppolo. I mentioned Debo and George Kittle. Even lesser guys like Jawan Jennings, Brandon Ayuk as good receivers. And, of course, that defense with guys like Nick Bosa, Fred Warner. He's got all these pieces around him where he doesn't have to be Superman. He could just be himself. He could just do the safe things and win football games. And I've been of the opinion, I think this whole offseason, that if you take Baker and give him what Jimmy Garoppolo has, I think you have something extremely similar, if not better, in my mind, than what Jimmy Garoppolo is. That's why I'm kind of hesitant to agree with those people who say that you need to move on from Baker if a guy like Kirk Cousins or Jimmy Garoppolo is there, just because I don't think that's much of a move in the right direction. If it's Derek Carr, then I think you're telling a different story.
Yeah, I guess the way I look at it is, if you give Baker Mayfield those skilled positions, what does he do in that offense? And I don't know the answer to that, but that's the question, for comparison's sake. If Baker Mayfield had Debo Samuel and he had George Kittle and he had some of those weapons, what would he be able to do with the ball in his hand in the fourth quarter?
Well, I think it kind of comes down to a problem that we saw with the Browns all season. Their receivers couldn't separate. They couldn't beat one-on-one coverage when defenses were going man-to-man against him, particularly what the Steelers and the Ravens were doing throughout the season. And that's the problem. They just never had guys who could get separation. And Baker, I think, when he was injured, maybe changed his thought process where he was a little more skittish to make those throws. I understand that to an extent. But you also got to have the confidence in your receivers that if you throw the ball in that direction, that they're going to go make the plays. So and then you have the drops as well from some of those guys, in particular Austin Hooper and Donovan Peoples-Jones, who were two of the biggest culprits when it comes to drops on this team. So Baker just needs guys who are going to get open and guys who could do things with the football in their hands, because you can argue he really hasn't had that at any point in his career. And any quarterback, let alone a young quarterback, really needs someone to make his life easier.
Fair enough. Tim Bielik from cleveland.com, as well as the Plain Dealer, and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. It's about Baker Mayfield. We will also take a look at the odds of where Aaron Rodgers will be playing quarterback in 2022. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Back to new friends, new classroom, and learning new things. Back to wearing shoes, man, like real shoes. Back to rushing to class. Back to having questions. Lots of questions. Back to vending machine dinners. Back to too much caffeine, too late at night, but feeling like it was a night well spent. Back to pursuing your dreams and taking control of your future. Come back to go forward. Try C, where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
We continue talking Browns on the snowy Monday afternoon, along with Tim Bielik from cleveland.com, as well as the Plain Dealer. Time to head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about Baker Mayfield.
Hey, this is James Seiler from Wadsworth. Hey, if you look at what Baker has done with the Browns he's had good years, the two even-numbered years. 2018 and 2020 had good years. 2019 and 2021, not so good. So I'm predicting a great year for him next year.
All right, Tim Bielik, numerology, zodiac, horoscope. Let's hope he's right. But there is something to that. And I mean, when you look at it, I guess the one thing you would say is there isn't the consistency that you want to see from a guy that you were going to commit to long-term as franchise quarterback.
No, definitely not. I think that's the biggest thing with Baker is we've seen just the high-end talent. We've seen just how naturally talented he is as a thrower. But, you know, this year, obviously, with the injuries, and in 2019, he was injured as well. You know, the whole problem with Freddie Kitchens and that offense meshing with Odell Beckham, it all kind of led to a bunch of problems. And then 2020 obviously turned it around, looked much better. I'm pretty sure the even odd year thing obviously is a coincidence. If this somehow continued about 4 years or whatever, and if Baker's still a Brown, then you might have to consider an odd year quarterback just so Baker, you don't have to play him in those odd years just in case. But I think that's where, you know, the young player thing still kind of comes into play for Baker. You got to find a way to increase his margin for error. Improving the defense did that to an extent, but now you got to do it on offense. You got to give him weapons that are going to make his life easier. because it's hard enough to play quarterback in the NFL. It's even harder when you're being asked to do, I think, as much as Baker is being asked to do when it comes to not having an elite guy where he could throw a 5-yard slant and it'd be taken for, for example, a 45-yard gain or something like that. So no question Baker has to play better, but, he's certainly got all the reason in the world to do so. And I think if the Browns upgrade around him at the skill positions, no reason to think he won't in 2022.
All right, this tweet is from Jamie Eisner. It's based on the odds on betonline.ag. Where will Aaron Rodgers play next season so there is a qualifier, if he leaves the Packers? Broncos plus 250, Steelers plus 350, Dolphins, Eagles. Browns checking in at plus 750, the fifth most likely. And again, that's if he leaves the Packers. And again, I think that's a long of the long shots would be Aaron Rodgers coming here. But when you looked at what the Packers need to do, they have a lot of guys that are up. Devontae Adams, a couple of guys on the line. So they have to figure out how to keep that core together, because the one thing Aaron Rodgers has come out and said is he doesn't want to go to a rebuilding situation. So the question with before Green Bay is how do you keep a strong core, which would be Devontae Adams, your left tackle, David Bakhtiari, and find a way to keep Rodgers. They're going to have to extend him because it's like a $47 million cap hit or something.
Yeah, and they're obviously tied up against the cap as well, with all those guys being free agents. The pressure, to be a contender around who's going to be a 39-year-old quarterback in Aaron Rodgers. Certainly that's going to be a huge problem for the Packers. And, I agree that it's kind of a long shot that the Browns would get him, but, this would be a move obviously worth exploring, because as much as I think it might be smart to stick with Baker just because you don't necessarily know you have a better option, Rodgers is for sure a better option, even if you only get a couple more years out of him, because then you could at least have a couple really good cracks at the Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers, more so than you would have with Baker, I think. The question, though, if you wanted to make that move, sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good.
Okay, yeah. The problem, I think, if you're going to make that move, unlike, say, if Seattle were to trade Russell Wilson for whatever, the Packers aren't going to want Baker Mayfield. They already have Jordan Love, the guy that they drafted in 2020 to potentially be the heir to Aaron Rodgers. So why would they want to take Baker unless they really want to have some competition there, to try and replace Aaron Rodgers there if you wanted to make that move? So that would be a complex thing where you would have to trade for Aaron Rodgers and then you would have to trade Baker Mayfield away to try and regain some of that draft capital you would have had to give up if you got Aaron Rodgers. So it's all complicated. Even if Aaron Rodgers was going to leave the Packers, and I can't imagine they would let him go unless they were for sure saying, we're just going to move in a different direction, because after what happened, in that game Saturday night, especially with the special teams problems and Aaron Rodgers and that Packers team failing to get over the hump now several years in a row with Matt LaFleur, something I think there has to change.
Yeah, the thing that the question becomes, what do the Browns do, after the 2 years or 3 years of Aaron Rodgers are up? Because you're presumably going to have to trade away high draft picks. So you're back to trying to identify who the quarterback is at that point as well. All right, one of the things that could help Baker Mayfield is a wide receiver. Let's take a look at your 5 top wide receivers, and this is from your Football Insider newsletter. So these are the top 5 wide receivers in the draft. Who do you like, and who do you think fits the best for the Browns?
Well, I look at that top 5. You can see Garrett Wilson, number 1, Treylon Burks, 2, then Chris Olave, Jamison Williams, and Drake London. And I said it when I wrote the newsletter that I thought this top 5 was very close, very interchangeable. The Browns, I don't think could go wrong with these guys. I think Garrett Wilson, I put him in number 1 just because I see a guy who's very complete, can do a lot of things. He can separate so extremely well. He's great with the ball in his hands. He can catch the ball. He's acrobatic. I've talked before about just how special his body control is. He's a guy who can play in the slot and on the perimeter and do both extremely well. Number 2, Treylon Burks, a guy I absolutely love. The more I watch, the more, I read about him. I've mentioned just the absolute mismatch he could be. And the other thing that sticks out to me when you look at him and his numbers, he was far and away the best receiver that Arkansas had in 2021. That means defenses were game planning against him. This is the SEC, by the way. This isn't, the Pac-12 or, Conference USA or whatever. These are the best players, the best coaches. They're keying to stop Treylon Burks, and they couldn't do it the entire season. He was just that dominant. So that tells you a lot about who he is. Chris Olave, number 3. He's as smooth as you can get at a receiver position. He's been a high-level contributor for the Buckeyes since that Michigan game in 2018 where he burst onto the scene. He's faster than people think. He's incredibly precise with his route running, and his hands are very good. I know he's had some drops in the past, particularly this season, but he's as dynamic as they get. Number 4, Jamison Williams. I really only have him at 4 because of the ACL surgery, the ACL injury he had early this month, And there's no question the kind of talent he is. He's unbelievably fast. He's got incredible hands. He knows how to make short catches and turn them into big plays. The hesitancy for me comes down to the ACL, and it's not even just kind of what it's going to do to him as a player. I think if you're the Browns, you got to look for a guy who's going to impact you now. You can't. And I look at Jamison Williams as a guy whose best impact for you, his earliest real impact is going to be in 2023. And I don't think if you're the Browns, you can afford to wait that long on a guy, even if he's the best guy. You got to get a guy now who can be an impactful player because you got to figure out what's going on at quarterback. And then number 5, Drake London. I love his size. I love the way he moves for a guy of his size. He's a guy who can make plays after the catch. And again, with that size at 6'5", 210 pounds, he could add a little more weight to his frame. I think he will over time. But I think if you have a guy who's naturally that big, has such a wide catch radius, that's just got to be something that Baker Mayfield would jump at the chance to throw to. Because if you're especially 6'1" quarterback, you got a 6'5" receiver, quarterbacks can't cover him one-on-one. That orange and brown helmet is going to be peeking out very quickly, and that will help him at the very worst go through progressions to see, where he would be if he kind of lines up, if he's in space, if he can get in the ball, whatever. But I look at these top 5 guys, pretty much any of them I think would be good fits for the Browns in the first round. This is just kind of, as it stands right now on January 24th, my preference for how I would kind of go in the top 5.
All right, Tim Bielik and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. On the other side of the break, we continue talking Browns. We will head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about special teams, plus 3 worst moves that the Browns made in 2021. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back talking Browns. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Back to new friends, new classroom, and learning new things. Back to wearing shoes, man, like real shoes. Back to rushing to class. Back to having questions, lots of questions. Back to vending machine dinners. Back to too much caffeine, too late at night, but feeling like it was a night well spent. Back to pursuing your dreams and taking control of your future. Come back to go forward. Try C, where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
We continue talking Browns football on this snowy Monday afternoon with Tim Bielik, cleveland.com, and Plain Dealer reporter. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about the Browns' kicking position.
A lot of people are talking about the Browns' offense, but the Browns' defense let us down a lot. But more so than that, looking at the game yesterday, the rookie kicker for the Bengals, he won the game for them. Why can't the Browns find a competent kicker? I mean, we've had point after, PATs blocked, missed, field goals missed. I think even the coach lost confidence in the kicker where he would go for it on fourth down more because he had no confidence in the kicker. Why is the Browns having a hard time finding a kicker? We haven't had a kicker since Phil Dawson. Other teams are able to find rookie kickers and come in with ice in their vein and win it in the fourth quarter in the playoffs. I'll listen to your comment. Thanks.
And Tim Bielik, it is not for a lack of trying. It's not an excuse. First Energy Stadium down the lakefront is a difficult place to kick. But he's right. You would think it at some point in time, you got to find a guy that you can rely on. They've drafted kickers that haven't panned out. They've tried to be. It's been a problem. It really has.
No question about it. I mean, it's been since Phil Dawson that the Browns have had a reliable kicker, and it's kind of funny that for years and years, as bad as the Browns were, the one thing you could rely on was their kicking, and then now all of a sudden the Browns are good, and the Browns are a much improved team, and there's all of a sudden a question of like, well, who's kicking the football? Why can't they find a good kicker? And you said it. I mean, they just have not been able to find the guy. It's kind of been a mix of journeyman and draft picks. I mean, Zane Gonzalez, Austin Seibert, those two obviously didn't work out. And it's the same thing as anything else. It's not just drafting a guy. You have to draft the right guy. And I mean, the Bengals struck gold with Evan McPherson. Obviously the Ravens signing Justin Tucker as an undrafted free agent was huge. I think it's just something you got to figure out how you're going to find these guys. You got to find a guy that can not only kick and that's been productive, but you also got to find a guy with a good mental makeup that, in those situations that he's comfortable, he's calm, and he can make those kicks. I mean, it's so huge, and we don't talk about it as much because it's not the sexy position, and kickers can be replaced so easily. But it's like quarterback. You got to keep trying till you find that guy. And unlike quarterback, you don't exactly have to spend a ton in assets to get him. You're not drafting a kicker in the first round or the second round or whatever. You're basically spending a late round pick at best or taking an undrafted guy. It sometimes comes down to luck, but you got to know what you're looking for in a kicker. Yeah, fair enough. All right. So this is from Draft History, and this is a tweet on the Browns and some of those names of guys that you mentioned. So Zane Gonzalez, Browns gave up on him, and he's been effective with other teams. Same thing with Greg Joseph. Austin Seibert has been kind of mediocre, maybe even a little bit less than he was with the Browns. But part of that kind of lets you take a look. Cody Parkey was better with the Browns. McLaughlin was better before he got to the Browns. So it's been kind of a mixed bag as far as the Browns and finding that kicker. And we saw just how critical that portion of the game is when you're playing good football teams. Special teams really matter in close games like you're going to be playing in the playoffs. We saw that yesterday and Saturday. Easily. And I go back to something I said a long time ago about the Ravens, even just earlier this season, that when you're playing them in a 2-minute drill or when they had the ball less than 2 minutes to go in that situation, they have an advantage knowing that as soon as they cross the 50, they're in field goal range. And I mean that partially in jest, but partially that's also true because of just how good Justin Tucker is. I'm not saying they can find a kicker as good as Justin Tucker because, he's probably the best kicker we've ever seen in football. And Evan McPherson can certainly catch up because we've seen just how good he is. He's had quite a few 50-yarders, early on in his NFL career. But again, they just have to be able to find the right guy. And it's not just about statistics. You can look at the picks like Zane Gonzalez and Austin Seibert. Those guys had some pretty solid kicking numbers in college, but numbers don't always tell the story in college. You got to be able to handle the pressure of those kicks. You got to be mentally tough. That when the game's on the line, when your season's on the line, that you're gonna come through with your team, and that's something you can't evaluate in stats. So that's a tricky thing to figure out with kicking. But It's really only a position I think you can go after if you have a lot of needs covered. And that's where I think, the Browns are in a decent position to take one just because they have depth in a lot of areas. So this should be a draft where if you find a kicker or even a punter you like in the 5th or 6th round, don't be afraid to use a pick on them. I mean, the Browns took a long stepper in the 5th round for a decade, and back in 2003, and Ryan Pomperion was around for a decade. So it's one little thing that you didn't have to worry about for a decade was trying to find, one of those guys. So it just comes down to just getting lucky and trusting your scouts that you're going to find a good guy and, not being afraid to take a swing with one of those picks.
All right, so this is according to BrownsNation.com. 3 worst moves the Browns made during the 2021 season. Number 1, playing Baker Mayfield all season. Number 2, not trading Odell. And number 3, punting late in the Raiders game. Number 3, I got nothing. It's clear now that Baker Mayfield should not have been playing all season. Repaired it, tweet, let everyone know surgery went well and successful. When you look at that, I mean, hindsight's always 20/20. I probably would have let him play a couple of games, and then a couple of games into it, I would have been like, this just doesn't look right. And I say that, and he played really well against Cincinnati. So I understand the argument that they checked with the medical people, they cleared him. Baker said he could play. I get that. But at some point, it just wasn't working.
Exactly. And I mean, you could tell after the Arizona game, it got even worse. The first time around, when that shoulder was injured against Houston, I mean, he had a couple of decent games. It was all right. I mean, the game against the Chargers, he was pretty good in that game. He gave them a chance to win despite, all the problems the defense had in that game, that crucial 4th down drop with Odell, all those things. He still gave them a chance to win. But yeah, after that point, I think, as much as your quarterback wants to go out there and say, yeah, I want to play, I can play. Of course he's going to say that. We know how competitive and tough Baker is. He's going to always say that. But at some point, you do kind of have to listen to what your eyes are telling you. And the eyes were saying, that Baker just wasn't able to play at the level that that he needed to play at. I mean, it's one thing to be able to play, but to play at a high level, he really couldn't do that consistently because even just his throwing mechanics alone with that shoulder harness pinning his left arm into his body, it was never going to be consistent mechanically. So that's why he had the good moments, and that's why he had plenty of the really bad moments. So it comes down to the coaches needing to see that and to tell Baker, no, you're not playing. We're shutting you down because you still got the extra year of his contract. You still have a chance to franchise him after year 6. They didn't have to make a decision on him. And in hindsight, you're not going to learn anything about a quarterback, and his ceiling when he's significantly limited before he even takes a snap out there because of the shoulder harness.
Yeah, I would agree. But again, hindsight 20/20. The other one, not trading Odell, and when that came out that he requested multiple times, boy, the last thing in the world that you want when you're a team that has high expectations is to have something that could potentially fracture in that locker room. And it kind of blew up trade deadline where they ended up having to cut him. And again, let's be clear, the Browns were not going to get fair value for Odell Beckham Jr. It's not like anybody was going to give them anything more than a 5th, 6th, 7th. Heck, that might have been a stretch. A 5th, 6th, 7th round pick with him being banged up the way he was might have been a stretch.
No question about it. I mean, the way Odell was playing in Cleveland, certainly not the level he's playing in Los Angeles. And again, I think that's due a lot to the attention, that Cooper Kupp kind of takes away from him in that passing game. And I mean, given the cap hit that Odell had, given, all the stuff with his contract, just the fact that he wasn't playing well coming up the torn ACL, the Browns just weren't going to get anything for him. And I think it made a lot of sense to just hang on to him because, I mean, if you're trading guy just for the sake of making a trade, you're probably going to make a bad deal. And that would have been a bad deal to really essentially trade Odell away virtually for nothing. And then if he goes off and, say you end up trading him to an AFC team like the Raiders or whatever, and he goes and lights it up there and the Browns had played the Raiders with Odell and Odell played a big role in that, then that would have looked really bad for the Browns, especially if they only got a 5th or 6th round pick. And who knows, they might still have had to take a cap hit just to make that deal. So just not a lot would have made sense to trade him. There's just kind of at some point they just kind of had to cut their losses. And, it's understandable why they kind of just had to cut him, because even if you were going to trade him, what were you going to get that was honestly going to match the value or even scratch the surface of the value that you gave up for him 3 years ago if you're the Browns?
Yeah, and so just did not work out here with Odell Beckham Jr. Tim Bielik and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. And on the other side of the break, we head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about play calling. We will also take a look at some early free agent targets the Browns might have in their sights. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from cleveland.com as well as the Plain Dealer. Time to head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about play calling for the Browns offense.
Dave, in my opinion, a major change to the Browns must be made immediately for the Browns to be successful going forward. That change is Kevin Stefanski must give up the play calling duties and concentrate on being a total team coach. Team is just a word unless you have a leader who is in total control and coordinates everything together as a unit. I believe because he tried to take on too much, he failed at parts of that task last season. As far as play calling, his philosophy of offense has been figured out by the rest of the NFL, and his refusal of making changes when changes are needed has been his downfall. A new offensive coordinator is needed who will mold all strengths of the players into a unit that's dominating starting on day one. Then and only then will the Browns be headed in the right direction.
All right, Ron Byer, a frequent voicemail contributor. Tim, I don't know that even if you have somebody else calling plays that you're going to drastically change the style of offense. Kevin Stefanski was hired because, he can teach this offense and there is value in this offense. It's similar to what Kyle Shanahan's running. It's similar to what, the Vikings are running. It's kind of similar to the Titans. So I don't know that even if you switch the play caller that the offense is going to drastically change.
No, I agree with you. I mean, the biggest change is going to come from improving personnel. I mean, you're not going to call a lot of pass plays if you don't have the guys who can get the job done as far as, the receivers go and those different things. And if your quarterback is limited because of an injury, you're not going to just force him to throw 50, 60 times a game and have him chuck deep ball after deep ball. It makes no sense. So really, if they're going to change the offense, it's going to come from improving personnel. I mean, maybe it would make sense to give Alex Van Pelt a shot to call the plays so Stefanski kind of focus on the operation, because this is year 3. So you're not reteaching the offense. The fundamentals are in place. Now you're just expanding on things. You're not reteaching everything. So maybe it would be a good idea for Stefanski to take a step back and kind of just be a CEO of things, oversee where everything went wrong and try and fix it from a 10,000-foot view. But I agree with you. You got to have the players to make the plays happen. And it's clear in 2021 that, at those positions, because of health and just lack of performance, they didn't have those guys.
All right, let's take a look at day 2. So rounds 2 and 3 of the NFL draft. What do you think the Browns need to try to get done day 2? So rounds 2 and 3 of this upcoming draft.
Well, I think day 2 could be a prime spot to get yourself another edge rusher as either a number two guy if you don't bring back Jadeveon Clowney, or a 3 even if you do, because Takk McKinley has the torn Achilles, so you're really not going to see a lot from him, if at all, in 2022. And I look at this class, doing my initial look into things, this is a pretty deep edge class going into day 2. I look at guys like Drake Jackson from USC, Myjai Sanders from Cincinnati, Kingsley Enagbare of South Carolina, for example, Josh Paschal from Kentucky. Those are day 2 guys at edge rusher that really stick out. Defensive tackle, same thing. There's guys I like there. Fedarian Mathis from Alabama, Perry and Winfrey from Oklahoma. If they can get a guy to fill one of those 2 positions, whether you're looking for a third edge rusher or a potential starting defensive tackle, I think that's the way to go. And I've been torn on this other idea. It seems a little sinister, and I don't know just kind of how this would work, but the idea of double dipping at the receiver position, because I feel like, and the consensus on the internet is the Browns should go receiver in the first round. So what do you do after that? You take another one again, because you look in the second round, there's going to be good ones there as well. I talked about those top 5 guys. Behind them, you got guys like Jahan Dotson from Penn State, John Mechie from Alabama, George Pickens from Georgia, David Bell from Purdue. So many good receivers. And I talked about just how vital that position could be and just how much of an injection of talent they could get at that position and the way the NFL is transforming to a passing game. Why not double dip? Why not just completely turn that position of weakness into a position of strength and dive headfirst into a very deep receiver class and just use your first two picks on them? I don't know if they would do that, but it would be very fascinating to say come out of the draft with Garrett Wilson and David Bell. All of a sudden, you've got a remade receiving core, especially if you pair that with a top-notch free agent. Then you leave Baker Mayfield or whoever's at quarterback with no excuses.
Well, the other thing is, it sounds like if defensive tackle, edge rusher are both deep as well as wide receiver, at least the Browns' needs, those are 3 areas that I don't think many people would argue are areas of need. At least this draft is deep in those 3 positions, which that's good news for Andrew Berry and the guys that have to remake this roster.
No question. I think receiver and edge rusher are much deeper than defensive tackle. D tackle is kind of one of the weaker areas. So if they were going to prioritize one of those 3 positions in the second round, maybe it's defensive tackle, and then you address edge rusher and receiver, potentially in round 3 or early in day 3. But I do think depth at those 2 positions should be key, along with, the obligatory draft and offensive lineman every year philosophy that I believe in.
All right, Tim Bielik, a reporter for the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. Tim, as always, man, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Have a good day, everybody.
All right, Tim Bielik, make sure you read him in the pages of the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we continue talking Browns. We'll be joined by Kevan Arnold from the Voice of the Land podcast. Another voicemail of truth and reason straight ahead. Stay with us on Sports4CLE.
Welcome back. Back to new friends, new classroom, and learning new things. Back to wearing shoes, man, like real shoes. Back to rushing to class. Back to having questions. Lots of questions. Back to vending machine dinners. Back to too much caffeine. Too late at night, but feeling like it was a night well spent. Back to pursuing your dreams and taking control of your future. Come back to go forward. Try C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on a snowy Monday afternoon. Time to head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about Baker Mayfield and the injury he suffered.
Hey, this is Tim D calling out from the Pacific Northwest here, Browns fan out here. And I heard Mary Kay say at the end of the January 20 video that she felt like Baker could pass a team physical and to get onto another team. That seems pretty unlikely given that he's still going to be far away from having full range of motion and so on, abilities with that left arm. Myself, having had the exact same surgery he has, I know it's a pretty long rehab period before you can really do the activities of daily living. And I appreciate if you guys could devote some follow-up to that. I think it's an important thing that has been largely overlooked so far in the sports media, the ins and outs of such a physical and whether it's really doable. Thank you so much.
All right, we appreciate the call. Let's welcome in Kevan Arnold from the Voice of the Land podcast. So, Kevan, any trade would not be done till the beginning of the league new year, which is March. So you're looking middle of March sometime. So he would need to be able to pass physical in April, May, which they do believe that he'll be able to do limited throwing, and that he'll be full go by the time training camp comes around. So it's not that he would have to pass the physical within any time before the new league year starts, which is middle to end of March. April, May. He should be able to, knock on wood, pass a team physical when it is required of him. I don't think that's going to come to be because I don't think they're going to end up trading Baker Mayfield. But that's when it would be. It would be, March, end of March, April, May, something like that.
Yeah, if you're looking to use Baker Mayfield as a piece in a trade to get to improve at the position of quarterback with this team, I know a lot of people are on that bandwagon. Others are on the bandwagon of keeping Baker. So what we've seen and heard so far, we know that this is still a business at the end of the day. Professional sports is still a business. So what these guys say doesn't always come to fruition. But for right now, they've said that Baker Mayfield is their quarterback moving forward. And we know when he's going to be ready. They think he'd be ready by training camp, be able to do some light throwing like you talked about, Dave. And teams know what the situation is as well. So I don't necessarily know if certain teams have certain protocols, if they're going to trade for a guy that they expect to be able to play during the season. But when they get him at the time that they do, especially in, around that March, April time when this new league year starts, I'm not sure if certain teams have protocols in place because they know where a guy's at physically at that time versus where he should be by the time that they're trying to add him to their squad. So like you, Dave, I don't see Baker Mayfield going anywhere, but things can change on a dime, as we know in professional sports.
Yeah, and the thing is at the time he would need to pass physical, he'll be able to pass physical. They'll be able to project it out, and they know, they will take so much. They will look at everything. There are, bone density and those kind of things, and they can see how the healing's going. It is much more involved than a standard physical would be. They will poke and prod until they're happy with what they see or get the answer that they want. All right, this one's according to Browns.com. 5 players who position themselves for bigger roles in 2022. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, Greedy Williams, 1 and 2, Demetric Felton, Grant Delpit, and Tommy Togiai. Kevin, hard to argue that the Browns will be doing a lot of things with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, a young guy, only 22. And the best thing I can say about him is the more I saw of him, the more I wanted to see. And the more possibilities I saw and want to see what Joe Woods and the Browns have in store for JOK.
JOK is that new style NFL linebacker, and I think the way that the linebacker position is going, people still question when guys like that come in where they don't think they have a position because they've played linebacker in college, but they're more of a frame, kind of a safety, but they don't always cover. JOK of course had great coverage skills at Notre Dame, which we saw throughout the season in the NFL progressing. And a guy you brought in for when you got to go against an athletic quarterback like Lamar Jackson, he definitely showed through in that unfortunate loss on Sunday Night Football. But he showed what he could do against Lamar, and even at times against Huntley when he had to come in for him in the game here in Cleveland. JOK is just going to continue to grow in that role, and he's again a fast linebacker. Yes, he's not as big as the traditional NFL linebackers, but with this pass happy league and everything being spread out and crossing it, yes, the Browns are a running offense, but you don't see that very much. You see these deep threats. You see tight ends being a big focal point in the passing game, more so than even maybe the pass blocking or run blocking type elements of the offense. So JOK is that quintessential and could be that first of maybe a bigger wave now of linebackers like that, and he's going to have a huge role on this defense. Joe Woods is probably looking at film like, if I would have gave him a little bit more based on how he progressed throughout the season, I can definitely see where we can use this guy in different and more unique ways that teams are just not going to be able to be ready for every single week of the season.
And the other two that we should touch on, Greedy Williams played pretty well and then kept getting banged up, but it was good to see him coming back after that, the second round pick. I thought he was pretty good. And I know there were times where he had to miss time because of that shoulder, but for a guy that hadn't played, he's a pretty good third corner. I was real happy with that. And the other one would be Grant Delpit, who missed all of his rookie season, was a little bit slow starting, but you saw the things that the Browns saw in him. Again, a lot of versatility from the safety position for Delpit. So Williams and Delpit, I'm on board with as far as guys that I think you'll see a lot more of in 2022.
And for me on that list, a little bit of bias because we just had him on the show last night on The Voice of the Land with Demetric Felton on the offensive side. But you mentioned the two that have to be looked at in this type of defense. If they can stay healthy, Grant Delpit and Greedy Williams are going to be major pieces because you kind of have maybe your cornerstones now, especially if you lock up Denzel Ward long-term or give him an extension on his contract like he should with being one of the top cornerbacks in this league or one of the better ones, above average cornerbacks, if you're going to go at the very least for Denzel Ward. Greg Newsome had one heck of a rookie season, but if you can have a rotation in there with another great cornerback like Greedy Williams and the skills he possesses, and then Grant Delpit back there with John Johnson III, what they can do in getting some guys in there to rotate in with them, now your secondary becomes strong. You strengthen the defensive line and your secondary now, it either gives your defensive line more time to get home or, if the defensive line's getting home quick, it makes that job as a defensive back even easier to even easier to cover. And words can be hard sometimes, Dave, but playing cornerbacks even harder. And these guys show that they can play that position and play the safety position well as long as they stay healthy. And that was a statement before the season, during the season. And it's just going to be something throughout. You got to stay healthy if you're going to have success in any sort of professional sports ranks.
Kevan Arnold from the Voice of the Land podcast and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we turn our attention to the Cavaliers. 28-19, only 2 games out of first place in the Eastern Conference. Cavs talk straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Back to new friends, new classroom, and learning new things. Back to wearing shoes, man, like real shoes. Back to rushing to class. Back to having questions. Lots of questions. Back to vending machine dinners. Back to too much caffeine, too late at night, but feeling like it was a night well spent. back to pursuing your dreams and taking control of your future. Come back to go forward. Try C, where futures begin.
Welcome back to Sports4CLE. We're going to shift our attention to the Cavs, getting ready to play the Knicks tonight. Cavs have been very good. One of the surprises in the entire NBA, 28-19, fifth in the Eastern Conference, just 2 games out of first place. So the question asked of J.B. Bickerstaff, if the Cavs' underdog mentality has changed with all the success they've had in the first half of the year.
You should still approach every game like you are the underdog. That's kind of who and how we built this, is that approach. And if you always feel like you're the underdog, you're the ones that are hunting people. You're the one that are chasing people down. You have to outwork them. You have to play well, and you have to play with that competitive spirit. So there should be no attitude shift because, big picture, we haven't done anything yet. So there's no reason to change our approach and our attitude. We got 82 games plus is what our goal is. So, until we, have a final puzzle to look at, we haven't done anything. So our approach should never change. We are the underdog.
Let's welcome in Kevan Arnold from the Voice of the Land podcast. And I love the mindset, love the attitude. Team plays defense. They play hard. They don't hang their heads. There's a lot going on that are signs of a good young team with the Cavaliers. And now they're going to be without another one of their players. They've overcome some injuries, and now Lauri Markkanen going to miss some time with what's likely a high ankle sprain, and it's probably going to be some significant time. So, again, they're going into that window where they had some chance to make some hay, and they're just throwing up another hurdle in front of this young team.
Yeah, and a team they understand that they're not surprising anyone anymore because people are starting to talk about them, and at least when teams are preparing for them before they come in the limited time they may have to prepare during the regular season, they are seeing what the Cavs are doing on film. It's one thing to see it and defend it, and that's why the Cavs have had still some success. But having that underdog mentality and understanding that, yeah, they're probably still going to be questioned now that a guy like Lauri Markkanen is out. Anytime you're losing one of your top guys, it's going to be questioned. Can you maintain the success? Because he was a piece of that success, and now he's out. It's just, it doesn't seem like the wheel ever stops turning with this team, no matter who's in there. Everybody plays a role, and it's a different guy every night. And we're going to say that now. We're going to continue to say that throughout the season, I think. It's going to be a different guy every night with consistencies more so with Darius Garland, Jared Allen, Evan Mobley. But a guy like Lamar Stevens, this is going to be an opportunity for him to get a little bit more playing time again. He had some early, got hurt. Unfortunately, probably was one of the guys dealing with COVID. Now gets a chance to get back in there as he's getting healthier, and some other guys on that bench, they get to show what they're made of and just make this roster deeper and deeper and consistent across the board and take advantage against some teams below 500 that they're going to see before this All-Star break, Dave.
Yeah, and Dean Wade's another guy, a bigger guy that probably will get some time with Markkanen out, catch and shoot 3 guy. All right, here's a trade scenario from NBAanalysis.net. And this one, so the Cavs get Buddy Hield, Maurice Harkness from the Kings. They give up Ricky Rubio's contract, Dylan Windler, Isaac Okoro, and a 2024 first-round pick, top 5 protected. I don't know how I feel about that one. The one thing that I would say about Isaac Okoro, Colin Sexton, you're going to have to make a decision there. You probably can't keep both of those guys long-term. And when you look at it, you're going to have to pay Evan Mobley a big contract in a couple of years. You're going to have to pay, you're already paying Jared Allen. You're going to have to pay Darius Garland. You don't have room for another big contract that Colin Sexton, averaging the type of points that he has, is probably going to earn. Okoro's a guy that plays really good defense and is athletic and has a his offensive game won't allow him to be one of those high dollar figure guys. I think he just kind of fits a little bit better. So I'd be really careful about trading Isaac Okoro. And I think his offense is coming. I'm not saying he's going to be Colin Sexton by any stretch of the imagination. What I'm saying is Mobley's going to get a contract. Allen's got his contract. Garland's going to get a contract. I don't know that you have the type of contract that it would take to keep Colin Sexton happy, given what's coming up payday-wise.
Yeah, Dave, while a trade involving Buddy Hield really intrigues me, and if you're going to start making moves that are about building for now and your future, you're not necessarily going to be looking at having draft picks. You're going to be trying to get younger talent that you have a little bit more control over, and they have a couple of years or a year and a half at least on their contract, and not just being a rental player for the remaining part of the season. But it's like you, Dave, the spot that I get kind of hung up with this proposed trade is where I see Mo Harkless and Isaac Okoro. Mo Harkless has been a good journeyman throughout the NBA, but I feel like his offensive game is set. The most he's averaged is 10 points in a season at one point a couple years back, but most of the time he's below 8 points a game. Isaac Okoro's offensive game is ascending, and his defense as a young piece right now that's available. Colin Sexton, unfortunately, not available to this team this season. Isaac Okoro is, and we saw what he can do, especially against some of the big wigs in the NBA, like Kyrie Irving at the end of that Brooklyn game. You're going to need a defender like that. Even if he's not scoring, he's got the energy the entire time to defend that best player, or the player that's the hottest on these teams that have multiple stars when you get into a playoff series, should this team make it, as I think that they will.
All right, Kevan Arnold from the Voice of the Land podcast. Kevin, as always, man, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Dave. You guys have a good one.
All right, Kevan Arnold, make sure you listen to him, Voice of the Land podcast. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Scheduled guest, Browns beat reporter from the Plain Dealer, as well as cleveland.com, Mary Kay Cabot, as well as Cavs beat reporter from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com, Chris Fedor. Lining up to be a great show tomorrow night at 4 o'clock. We will see you then on Sports for CLE. Have a great night, everybody.